You are rewriting your future through the past right now, but in the wrong direction. Every painful memory that you relive programs your tomorrow, releasing the same stress chemicals, tensing the same muscles, and repeating the trauma as if it were happening now. Goddard demonstrated that the past exists only as present mental activity, not as an unchangeable fact. Your compulsive and autopilot thoughts, reaffirming, "I've always been this way, I never succeed." They don't describe who you are, but prescribe who you will continue to be. You repeat inherited fears and limitations that have crossed generations, without ever questioning if they are yours. But if you are only a set of mental stories about a past that exists solely as a present image, who are you really beyond this repetition? The revision technique teaches that every human being possesses the innate capacity to consciously rewrite these memories before sleep, altering the subconscious seeds that generate the current experience. The philosophical question remains, if you can revise, but choose not to, are you preferring to be a prisoner of ghosts that only exist because you feed them?
Neville Goddard's most radical discovery lies in the malleable nature of reality through the conscious reimagination of the past. During decades of studying the scriptures and practical experimentation, Neville developed a system that demonstrates how the human imagination is the primary force that creates our life experience. The theory of revision establishes that every human being possesses the capacity to rewrite the future through the imaginative alteration of past events. When someone mentally revises a memory and reimagines it as they would have wished it to occur, they modify the subconscious impressions that generate the present and future experience. The mechanism operates because the past exists exclusively as active memory in consciousness. Neville taught in his lectures that the creature was made subject to futility by the will of him who subjected it in hope. Consciousness experiences only the impressions that it itself sustains through feeling and mental repetition. As demonstrated in The Maker and the Maker of Things, John Stuart Mill defines causation as the set of phenomena which, when they occur, cause other phenomena to begin appearing. Applying this to revision, causation is the set of imaginary mental states that implies the fulfillment of what is desired. The law of assumption underlies the entire technique. What you accept as true, deep in your being, becomes your reality. Neville exemplifies this with the case of the lady who imagined her brother free from military prison. She constructed the scene of hearing the doorbell, going down the stairs, and finding him at her door. 1 week later, the event occurred exactly as imagined. The brother was freed through circumstances that she didn't need to know or manipulate. The technique operates through the deliberate alteration of subconscious seeds. Each mental impression combines image, meaning, and affective charge. Over time, this combination defines automatic responses, expectations, and patterns of attention. When consciousness realigns image and effect through revision, the subconscious updates its reference map. The old plot loses authority, and the new one assumes the role of silent cause. Neville describes this process in his Eternal Play as the movement through eternal states. God only acts and is in existing beings or men. The states of poverty and wealth, sickness and health are permanent and eternal. A person doesn't transform poverty into wealth. They leave the state of poverty and enter the state of wealth through imaginative assumption. The practitioner selects narratives that contradict the desired end and replaces them with narratives that confirm it. The French lady seeking an apartment applied the technique after reading Neville's books. She saw Neville in her room in a vision, showing her a door that was difficult to move. The next day, she found the desired apartment with exactly that physical characteristic, stuck sliding doors that she had seen in the visionary experience. Revision places memory under conscious direction. Instead of passively accepting it was like that, the person assumes it was as it needed to be for this end. Causal control transfers from the apparently fixed past to the active present imagination. As Neville states, "Unless you believe that I am He, you will die in your sins." Sin meaning to miss the mark, to fail to reach the desired goal. The technique gives individual imagination absolute responsibility for the experienced world. By Him, all things were made, and without Him, nothing that was made was made. This Him is the human imagination, which Neville identifies as Christ Jesus Himself dwelling in each person. The past that someone mentally invokes arises as a present image, with present affect, sustained by present belief. A person never experiences the past itself. They always experience their current imaginative construction of it. Memories are assemblages of mental states maintained by habit and emotion. Daily practice prevents undesired episodes from sedimenting as official history. Neville recommended revising each night before sleep, rewriting any event of the day that contradicted the chosen state. This discipline installs systematic imaginative hygiene. The training consolidates the capacity to feel the new past as more real than the original narrative. Through revision, identity stops serving limiting narratives and grounds itself in narratives of fulfillment. The reach of the technique redefines human experience. Consciousness as cause, assumption as law, memory as moldable material, and time as a flexible dimension of experience. Revision operates through a specific protocol developed by Neville Goddard that uses altered states of consciousness to reprogram subconscious impressions. The technical procedure is based on the understanding that the mind processes information differently in various states of wakefulness. When someone wishes to apply the technique, they first identify in memory an event that still exerts influence over the present mental state. Here arises the first provocation to conventional thinking. Why do past events continue determining present reactions if they exist only as mental constructions? The answer lies in the nature of subconscious impressions. They operate as automatic programs until deliberately altered. The mental state called akin to sleep, similar to sleep, constitutes the central element of the technique. This specific state occurs at the threshold between wakefulness and drowsiness, when brainwaves slow down but consciousness remains active. In this particular state, the barrier between conscious and subconscious becomes permeable. Mental images acquire exceptional intensity. Feeling naturally fuses with visualization. Why does this specific state produce superior results? The analytical mind, guardian of accepted limitations, relaxes its control. Logical objections temporarily cease. The subconscious, which doesn't distinguish between vivid imaginary experience and factual memory, accepts the new programming as established reality. The technical procedure follows this sequence: reduction of external stimuli, complete physical relaxation, entry into the state between awake and sleeping, mental reproduction of the original scene, deliberate editing of the outcome, saturation with the feeling of accomplished reality, and complete release of the revised scene. Each element has a specific function in the process. The reduction of stimuli minimizes interference. Physical relaxation facilitates the alteration of mental state. This moment before sleep allows direct access to the subconscious. Reproduction activates the original memory. Editing installs new programming. Feeling the emotion in a new scene as completely real fixes the change. Release allows subconscious processing. Notice how this radically differs from simple positive thoughts or affirmations. Revision doesn't try to overlay a pleasant idea on an unpleasant memory. It literally rewrites the subconscious record of the event. The person experiences the revised version through the imaginary senses, sees, hears, feels, touches, and even smells if necessary, as if it were really happening now. Neville established that the ideal moment for practice is before sleep. Why? During the day, consciousness is busy processing constant external stimuli. At night, when the outside world quiets down, the mind naturally turns inward. The pre-sleep state facilitates the transition to the akin to sleep state. Additionally, the subconscious remains highly active during sleep, processing and consolidating the last impressions received. Daily discipline prevents negative impressions from crystallizing as operational patterns. Consider this. How many times does an unpleasant event from the day remain circulating in the mind before sleep? Without conscious intervention, these impressions sediment in the subconscious, reinforcing limiting patterns. Nightly revision functions as a conscious filter, editing experiences before they become fixed memories. The concept of movement in consciousness deserves deep analysis. Neville teaches that movement can only be detected by change of position relative to another object. How do you know if revision worked? When other people begin to react differently, when external circumstances align with the revised internal state, when old emotional reactions no longer arise in the face of familiar triggers. The technique doesn't seek to erase memories. That would be impossible and counterproductive. Instead, it removes the negative emotional charge and the causal authority of the original event. The memory remains, but loses its power to determine present and future reactions. New subconscious programming takes control. Why is first-person experience crucial? The subconscious responds primarily to direct sensory impressions, not to abstract observations. Mentally watching a scene as a spectator produces minimal impact. Experiencing it through your own imaginary senses creates subconscious impressions indistinguishable from real memories. The complete set of thoughts, images, and feelings that lead to the desired result needs to be present. It's not enough to vaguely imagine a different outcome. The revised scene needs to include all the sensory and emotional elements that make an experience real and memorable. The potency lies in total implication, not in disconnected fragments. Neville discovered that feeling the new scene as completely real determines whether the technique works. The new scene needs to be felt as more real than the original memory. This requires repetition until the feeling of naturalness establishes itself. When the revised version sounds internally more true than the original event, the reprogramming is complete. Release constitutes the frequently neglected final step. After saturating the scene with felt reality, the practitioner must completely let it go. Continuing to mentally manipulate indicates subconscious doubt. True faith in the technique manifests as serene detachment after revision. Through this precise architecture, imagination transforms from a passive faculty into an active instrument for reprogramming reality. The method provides replicable structure and predictable results because it operates according to specific psychological laws, not through vague hope or random coincidence. Revision operates on mental impressions that function as causal seeds in consciousness. Each impression combines three fundamental elements: mental image, attributed meaning, and affective charge. This triad determines how the subconscious processes experiences and generates automatic responses in the present. Consider how a single traumatic experience can determine decades of behavior. A childhood rejection programs patterns of social avoidance. A business failure installs fear of entrepreneurship again. A romantic betrayal creates walls against intimacy. But what keeps these patterns active? The answer lies in the nature of subconscious seeds. The subconscious doesn't distinguish between past, present, and future. For it, every vivid impression loaded with emotion exists in an eternal now. When someone recalls a painful event, the body produces the same chemical reactions as the original moment. The heart accelerates, muscles tense, and stress hormones are released. Memory becomes present experience through imagination. The revision technique intervenes precisely in this mechanism. By deliberately altering the remembered scene with new meaning and congruent feeling, consciousness rewrites the causal seed. The subconscious updates its reference map based on the new impression. What operated as trauma loses authority. The new plot assumes a generative function. This process has been described as an act of inner forgiveness, not moral or religious forgiveness, but technical release of a repetitive mental pattern. The mind abandons the internal conversation that kept the old plot active. It replaces the mental dialogue with a script that confirms the desired fulfillment. The change occurs at the level of fundamental identity. Why does mental talk have so much power? The constant internal dialogue programs and reprograms the subconscious continuously. I never succeed, this always happens to me, I'm not capable. These repeated phrases install identity vibrations that magnetize corresponding experiences. The person literally hypnotizes themselves to continue experiencing what they internally affirm. Revision interrupts this self-destructive loop. When someone successfully revises an event, the internal speech automatically changes. Instead of "I was rejected," there arises "I was accepted." Instead of "I failed," there emerges "I succeeded." This change isn't superficial. It occurs at the deep level where identity and experience intertwine. The mechanism doesn't depend on external factors because it locates the cause in the internally felt assumption. Here lies the revolutionary power of the technique. By revising, the person withdraws from the apparent past the power to prescribe the future. They change the starting point of their personal history to the desired state. The past stops being a dictator and becomes a servant of conscious imagination. Repetition seeks to make you deeply feel the new reality, not force the mind. The new past needs to sound true in the depths of being. When this occurs, the mind spontaneously selects perceptions compatible with the revised story. Attention naturally focuses on evidence that confirms the new narrative. Opportunities previously invisible become obvious. Examine this phenomenon. Two people can live in the same city, work in the same building, frequent the same places, but inhabit completely different realities. One sees scarcity, competition, and hostility. Another perceives abundance, cooperation, and kindness. The difference isn't in the external world, it's in the subconscious seeds that filter perception. All necessary mental impressions, images, sounds, and sensations need to form a coherent whole that points to the result. Disconnected fragments don't produce substantial change. The revised scene must contain all the elements that would make the experience undoubtedly real if it happened physically. The subconscious responds to the totality of the impression, not to isolated parts. That's why first-person experience is essential. Mentally observing isn't sufficient. Participating with all imaginary senses creates impressions that the subconscious accepts as valid memories for constructing present reality. When consciousness realigns image and effect through systematic revision, profound changes occur. Micro-habits that reaffirmed the old narrative naturally dissolve. Automatic reactions are replaced. Thought patterns reorganize. The person discovers themselves acting differently without conscious effort. The akin to sleep state facilitates this process because in it, the critical mind relaxes its objections. The barriers between conscious and subconscious become permeable. Imaginative impressions penetrate directly into the deep layers of the psyche, where the automatic programs that govern experience operate. The technique doesn't create pretense or self-deception. It reprograms the lens through which you understand and see things, and consciousness processes reality. The same external facts can mean failure or learning, rejection or redirection, loss or liberation, depending on the mental frame applied. This mechanism explains why some people transcend apparently impossible circumstances while others remain prisoners of favorable conditions. The difference lies in the subconscious seeds that each one cultivates through attention and mental repetition. Revision offers a systematic method to replace limiting seeds with liberating seeds, not through willpower or moral discipline, but through the conscious and felt reimagination of the past that still operates as cause in the present. When one masters this art, the practitioner becomes a conscious gardener of their own subconscious garden. Time in consciousness functions completely differently from time on the clock. Neville discovered that the past exists only as mental activity happening now. When you remember something that happened 10 years ago, where is that event? It's here, in this moment, as an image and feeling present in your mind. There are eternal states through which we pass: poverty, wealth, sickness, health, loneliness, and love. These states are like rooms in an infinite house. You don't transform the room of poverty into the room of wealth. You simply leave one and enter the other. The rooms remain where they've always been. How do you know if you've changed states? Movement can only be detected by change of position relative to another object. When people begin to treat you differently, when different opportunities appear, when your automatic reactions change, then there has been real movement between states. Memory functions as a set of images, words, and sensations that, when activated together, produce specific experiences in the present. Every time you recall something painful, your body reacts as if it were happening again. The heart accelerates, muscles tense, and stress chemicals are released. Memory becomes current experience through imagination. Revision intervenes exactly in this process. Before sleep, you review the day, that argument at work, revise it for harmony, the unexpected bill that arrived, revise it for abundance, the worrying medical news, revise it for perfect health. You're not pretending it didn't happen. You're changing the meaning and the feeling it carries. In this nightly practice, sleep is when the subconscious processes and archives the day's experiences. If you sleep mentally repeating a humiliation, you wake with that energy. If you revise for victory before sleep, you wake in that state. The last thought before sleep is a powerful seed. The past operates as repetitive mental conversation. I've always been shy. I've never been lucky with money. Relationships always hurt me. These repeated phrases keep the person trapped in the same state. Revision changes this internal conversation from the root, altering the memories that justify it. God only acts and is in existing beings. This phrase from the lectures reveals that the same creative force is in everyone, experiencing different states. When someone says, "I am poor," the "I am" is God experiencing poverty. When they say, "I am prosperous," it's the same "I am" in another state. The subconscious has no calendar. For it, something that happened 30 years ago and something from yesterday have the same weight if they carry the same emotional intensity. That's why old traumas can control present life. They remain alive and active in the subconscious. Revision deactivates them by changing their emotional charge. People who practice the technique consistently report surprising changes. Patterns that seemed fixed for decades dissolve in weeks. Fears rooted since childhood simply evaporate. Limitations that seemed part of the personality disappear naturally. Why? Because when you change the fundamental memory upon which you built your identity, the entire structure reorganizes. It's like changing the foundation of a house. Everything above realigns. But in the case of consciousness, this realignment can be instantaneous. The technique reveals that you don't have a past. You have stories about a past, and stories can be retold. If the story you tell about your childhood is one of abandonment, you'll continue attracting abandonment. If you revise it to a story of protection and care, even maintaining the same external facts, your present energy changes completely. Revision works because by Him all things were made, Him being the human imagination. If imagination created the original experience through assuming specific states, it can recreate by assuming different states. The power was always in imagination, not in external events. Each mental state has its own associated memories. In the state of prosperity, you naturally recall moments of abundance. In the state of scarcity, you mainly remember losses. Revision allows you to consciously choose which memories to activate and strengthen. Psychological time becomes a tool in the practitioner's hands. Instead of being dragged by automatic memories, they choose which stories to tell. Instead of reacting to a fixed past, they create a past that serves the desired present. The timeline bends to the awakened imagination. Revision demands total responsibility for the maintained mental conversation. Each phrase internally repeated reinforces a specific state and expands a corresponding world. I never have luck. I'm always betrayed. I'm not capable. These internal affirmations program the subconscious to manifest exactly what they declare. The concept of forgiveness in revision differs completely from religious or moral forgiveness. It's about technical release. Consciousness stops feeding the mental script that keeps conflict active. When you revise a betrayal to loyalty, you're not absolving the traitor. You're freeing yourself from the state of betrayed person that continues attracting betrayals. Neville emphasized that each person chooses what they honor with attention and emotion. Attention is mental fertilizer. Emotion is water that makes the seed germinate. When someone dedicates hours reliving injustices, they cultivate a garden of bitterness. When they revise these memories for justice and harmony, they plant seeds of corresponding experiences. Internal coherence determines the effectiveness of practice. Revising at night and contradicting during the day nullifies the work. If you revise an argument for mutual understanding, but spend the next day telling everyone about the fight, you reinforce the original state. The discipline requires alignment between nightly revision and daily conversation. Resistance arises mainly from identity attachment to old stories. Many people build their identity on their traumas. I'm this way because my father abandoned me. I don't trust because I was betrayed. These narratives become psychological crutches. Abandoning them seems to threaten identity itself. The technique proposes letting go of this attachment and inhabiting the new name that imagination consecrates. In his Eternal Play, Neville explains that in the end you receive a new name, I am Jesus, meaning that human imagination awakens to its true creative identity. Each revision is a step in that direction. The ethics of revision operates through understanding psychic cause and effect. There are no victims or villains at the deepest level, only consciousnesses experiencing states that they themselves sustain. When someone appears as an antagonist in your life, they're representing a state that you maintain internally. This doesn't mean blaming yourself for everything that happens. It means recognizing the power to change your experience by changing your internal state. If you maintain the state of, people disappoint me, you'll continue finding people who confirm that expectation. Revise to people surprise me positively and observe the change. Mental conversation determines the occupied state. Neville documented how people say, I am, before any qualification. I am poor. I am sick. I am alone. The same divine I am experiences limitation through the assumed word. Revision changes the word after the I am. When resistance arises during practice, it usually indicates proximity to significant change. The ego built on the old story fights to survive. Recognizing this resistance as a sign of progress, not failure, keeps the practitioner on the path. Coherence requires constant mental vigilance. How many times a day do you mentally repeat negative conversations? How many times do you reinforce limitations through casual words? I'm terrible with numbers. I always forget names. I have no talent for this. Each repetition deepens the mental groove. The practice establishes new discipline, consciously choosing the past that liberates, sustaining the conversation that confirms the desired state, and living from the identity that corresponds to the chosen end. Not through moral effort, but through clarity about the mechanism. Fidelity to the revised state means refusing temporary contrary evidence. When you revise from sickness to health, symptoms may initially persist. The untrained mind interprets this as failure. The experienced practitioner recognizes the interval between internal change and external manifestation. Those whom he called, he also justified. This passage quoted by Neville indicates that by assuming a state, you are justified in it, meaning you receive the experiences that confirm it. But first comes the call, the decision to occupy the new state through revision. The deepest ethics of the technique lies in the fact that everyone has the same power to create their reality. There are no special chosen ones. There are no unworthy. Everyone possesses the same divine imagination. Everyone can revise. Everyone can change states. The only difference lies in who knows and applies the principle. This eliminates excuses and victimization. If you can revise but don't, you've chosen to remain in the current state. If you know the technique but don't practice, you've preferred your limitations. A hard truth that many reject, preferring to blame circumstances, other people, and fate. Revision installs permanent mental hygiene. Just as you brush your teeth daily, you revise mental impressions. Just as you wouldn't let dirt accumulate in your house, you don't allow negative impressions to sediment in your consciousness. Through this discipline, the mind stops negotiating with old narratives. It stops justifying limitations. It stops defending failures. Instead, it serenely sustains the dignity of the chosen end until that dignity defines new habits, traits, and results. Revision requires rhythm and finesse in application. Rhythm, because the mind constantly returns to familiar mental grooves. Finesse, because the technique works through the feeling of the accomplished end, not through anxious manipulation of means. Integration with daily routine closes the practice circuit. At the end of each day, the practitioner systematically reviews the scenes that contradict the chosen state. A criticism received transforms into praise. A missed opportunity becomes seized. A closed door reveals itself as open. The body relaxes in the relief of the revised result. During the day, mental conversation maintains alignment with the new past. If at night you revised rejection to acceptance, during the day you sustain the internal dialogue of someone accepted and valued. When you contradict yourself during the day, what you revised at night, you undo the mental work you did. Mastery comes through the art of feeling the end, not pursuing means. When someone revises anxiously, constantly checking if it worked, they demonstrate doubt in the technique. When they revise, and then naturally live from the revised state, they demonstrate faith that the technique works. If imagination decides the meaning of what you remember, then you don't carry an inevitable burden of the past. You carry work that is always open to editing. Each memory can be rewritten. Each trauma can become a stepping stone. Each failure can turn into preparation for success. The dominant culture teaches determinism. You are a product of your past. Revision teaches assumption. You choose which past to cultivate. Mental habit repeats. It's always been this way. Practice responds, I decide what this means now. Identity stops serving narratives of damage and grounds itself in narratives of fulfillment. Divine consciousness acts through all human beings, experiencing different states. When you practice revision, you exercise this creative power to transit between eternal states. The possibilities always existed. You just learn to navigate them consciously. Daily practice sharpens perception of occupied states, negative conversations, reactivated painful memories, projections of failure. Everything becomes immediately recognizable. With recognition comes the opportunity for instant revision. Advanced practitioners report an interesting phenomenon. They begin to revise in real time. The moment something undesired happens, they're already mentally rewriting. They don't need to wait for night. Revision becomes an automatic reflex, like breathing. Mastery of the technique transcends punctual corrections. It establishes a new relationship with reality where consciousness is cause, memory is moldable material, and time is a navigable dimension. Every experience lived was first imagined. Every limitation faced was internally assumed. Every possibility manifested was first felt as real. By rewriting the past in imagination with the feeling of reality, the practitioner alters the invisible soil that produces visible fruits. The subconscious roots that feed daily experience are transformed. New vital energy circulates through consciousness, generating new patterns of manifestation. The practice reveals that all things are made through human imagination. Every experience lived was first imagined, consciously or not. Every limitation faced was internally assumed. Every possibility manifested was first felt as real internally. Mastering revision means becoming a conscious gardener of your own mental garden. You choose which seed memories to water with attention. You choose which weeds to pull out by the root through reimagination. You choose which harvest to prepare through careful selection of the cultivated past. The technique eliminates the false belief that your personal history determines your destiny, birth, family, education, and traumas. None of this determines destiny when you know and apply revision. These circumstances become raw material for creative reimagination. The principle has been demonstrated countless times. People without formal education became scholars through assumption. Individuals without resources manifested abundance. Lonely people build deep relationships through the systematic application of revision. The power was always in imagination, waiting to be recognized and directed. Revision offers a systematic method to awaken and apply this power. It doesn't promise instant magic. It promises gradual mastery over the internal states that determine external experience. Through consistent practice, you discover a liberating truth. The past isn't a chain that binds, but clay that molds. The present isn't a fixed consequence, but a moment of creative choice. The future isn't a sealed destiny, but an open field of imaginable possibilities. All change begins with understanding your role as co-creator. And the only way to connect with this divine intelligence is through meditation. We've developed a set of audio tools to help you access this higher state of consciousness. To learn more and get immediate access, click the link on the screen or in the comments. If this video resonated with you, write in the comments. It made sense to me.